All right, we are live, everybody. Thank you guys for being here. Whoever's in here, man, I gotta switch it up tonight. I gotta switch it up. We had a huge storm come through today and knocked the power out earlier. Like 15 minutes into the storm, power goes out. Apparently, a bunch of trees went down and took out a bunch of power lines, and now there's thousands of people in the area without power. And I just so happen to be one of them. So yay me. So I guess I get to do one of these talks with you guys that I don't normally get to do because of the live streams, because of my streaming style is normally um slideshows and that type of shit. But tonight I wanted to talk about the business of being a truther because I was thinking about it today and I figured this is a good subject to touch on because I know there's a lot of people out there that are considering becoming truth tellers and content creators, and other people who have already kind of, gotten their feet wet and started putting out content. And I thought I should have this discussion because there's layers to this whole being a truther thing, right? The first thing is the the alienation and being ostracized. Once you decide, because remember, the thing is, we live in a world created by liars that's built on lies and deception. And for most people to be satisfied and to be content living in this deceptive world, you kind of have to live in a delusion a little bit, like ignorant bliss, right? And this goes for, and this could be applied to like the globe earthers versus the flat earth debate and so on, where as flat earthers we look at the evidence that shows us that the globe's not real, and then we enter into these discussions with people who believe that the globe is real, and we find in a lot of cases that they resort to psychological bullying tactics, gaslighting, um, willful ignorance, just completely ignoring the facts, just to hold on to their belief. Because in shattering that belief, you basically shatter their entire world, pretty much, and it causes a lot of backlash, right? And in being a truther, that's kind of what we do, right? We do the research, we dig into the facts, we find out the truth, and then we share the truth. But because this truth, excuse me, it's so upsetting to a lot of people, and it kind of shatters their world. Because of this, people don't really want to deal with us. And I've heard about people losing contracts, losing their jobs, like airline pilots, for example, that actually claim Earth is flat. They would, you know, recommend that they get like psychiatric treatment and all that kind of stuff just to keep the lie going, just to not shatter the world of delusion that most people live in. Now, the word truther it's a very special word because it's rather new to the English vernacular. The word truther was created kind of like in the same fashion that the term conspiracy theorist was created, right? There was a major event in America, and there were people not only in America but all around the world who were seeking the truth, who were looking into the truth and sharing the truth of this event, that event being 9/11, of course. And when 9/11 happened, I mean, the term conspiracy theorist, the term conspiracy theorist was created, I was saying, in the same fashion that, I'm sorry, I'm on StreamYard, so I'm seeing the comments and it's kind of throwing me off. But what up, Sharif? Shout out to Karen. Shout out to my brother Lee 14224 with the Faithful Five on the Cash App. Shout out to my brother Devin that dropped three on the Cash App from the last show. And I want to give a big shout out to my brother Rap Palace that dropped two on your boy. So I appreciate that. Brother Lee says, "Hey everyone, Citizen Man, do a take on the Terrence Howard, Joe Rogan experience. I was so disappointed that he is a Glober, but I loved the pandemic and scared and sacred geometry stuff." Well, here's the thing, Lee. Brother Sanchez actually did an excellent stream on that, and I'll get to that in a second. But what I was saying was the major event was the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and people who were deciphering the clues and figuring out that the official story exactly was not exactly consistent with what happened. The CIA coined the phrase conspiracy theorist and had the Mockingbird media start parroting that word and putting that idea and that thought in the minds of the masses that anybody who questions the official story has to now bear this label. Excuse me, sorry. Has to now bear this label and carry this scarlet letter. So it was kind of like the scarlet letter, right? It was like a derogatory mark they put on you to discredit you. Then fast forward to 9/11. 9/11 happened, and all these so-called conspiracy theorists started to dig into the truth behind what really happened on 9/11 and found out that there was a lot more to it, and the official story was a bunch of crap. Well, the establishment, instead of calling them conspiracy theorists, this time they came up with the term truther. And I thought it was a weird disparagement, a weird term to use to disparage people who were actually seeking the truth about what really happened, because the opposite of a truther would be a liar. So did they want us all to be liars and lie to ourselves? You know what I'm saying? So this term truther ended up having like a more negative connotation because of that. But many of us truth tellers, aka truthers, have actually worn that label as a badge of honor. And so do I. I'd rather be a truther than a liar, and I'd rather be a truther than be a believer. But in being a truther, it comes at a very, very high cost. It comes at a high cost to where you lose friends, you lose family, because those people don't want to have their delusions shattered and be faced with the actual reality of what's really happening. You lose jobs, you lose business, because people don't want to do business with somebody that's basically destroying their ignorant, breaking them out of their ignorant bliss and destroying their delusion. And it's this destruction of this ignorant bliss and this delusion is what people fear, right? They fear it because they spend their whole lives believing these beliefs, being comfortable with these beliefs, and accepting these beliefs. But then when they start to realize that what they've been taught to believe is a lie, a lot of people, their feeble minds just can't take it. And so, being a truther, not only do you have to swim upstream and fight against an establishment that's built by liars and based on lies, but you also have to battle with your fellow man, your fellow common man who's bought into these lies and who's comfortable living this lie. You know what I'm saying? So it makes for a very lonely experience. It's not very profitable at all, unless you guys keep hitting the cash app. Well, then you can make it profitable. We the people have the power to do that. The power is at your fingertips. But it's not very profitable, and you don't get a lot of notoriety, right? The fame and fortune doesn't come with being a truther and telling the truth. What comes with it is ridicule, isolation, uh, economic attacks to keep you in poverty. Because as long as they keep you in survival mode, you won't have time to do research, right? You're not gonna have any. You barely ever have any free time because there ain't shit in life for free. So you got to go out and you got to work. You got to bust hump and you got to make that money so you can pay those bills and survive this world. But not only do you have the establishment that censors you and promotes liars above you and so on, but then you got to deal with the average folks that are going to disparage you and try to discredit you just for the sake of their own personal satisfaction. And it's definitely an uphill battle. It's definitely swimming upstream, but there's this weird sense of fulfillment that comes with it, right? Where you know what you're teaching is true. You know the information that you're sharing is true because you've done the research, you've done the counter research, you've looked at both sides of the narrative, you've looked at all the evidence, and you've drawn a reasonable conclusion, right? And in drawing these reasonable conclusions, it gets you a little closer to actually finding the truth. And there's this sense of satisfaction where you can now finally answer those questions that that you've been plagued with since you realized that those beliefs that you were taught your whole life are nothing but a lie. And I believe this is why, for example, excuse me, the flat earth teachings that I do actually resonate with so many people, surprisingly, because most of us who are actually thinkers as children, when we were taught the globe, our first thought was, well, how come the people at the bottom of the globe don't fall off, right? Or how does the water stick to the globe? And, just basic questions like that. And the fact that we were mindful enough to think these things through and not just, accept them hook, line, and sinker, that put us in a special category. That put us in the category of being truthers. And because of this, those pesky, annoying questions that we like to ask that the lying establishment can't answer, um, because we upset the balance of everybody's delusion, because we tend to be the ones that come in and make noise and cause disruptions. We tend to be the ones to be demonized and seen as the bad guys, when in fact, the people who are lying to you are the bad guys. The liars that you're defending are the bad guys. And that's why it's so irritating for me to have these flat earth, globe earth debates with globe earthers, because it's like, you're calling me stupid. You're calling me this. You're calling me that. You're calling me every name in the book. And you're defending the very people that are deceiving you and have been deceiving you your whole life. Even like on the political side of things, when Trump first came on the scene, all the black people were being brainwashed and propagandized into believing Trump was a racist. And as, you know, fellow black conservatives were trying to awaken, the black electorate to the benefits of having somebody like Trump as president, we were called coons and sellouts and every other name in the book, not realizing that these people, with these people not realizing that in doing that, you're demonizing you're supposed to be fighting against a racist, right? You're supposed to be against racists, but you're demonizing and using racist names to disparage your fellow black American who's actually trying to share the truth with you. And at the same time, you're not only pushing the narrative of, but you're defending the political party, the Democratic Party, that was solely responsible for enslaving your ancestors and depriving them of basic civil human rights. But you see, people don't like to be woken up out of their delusions because they're comfortable there. And there's a famous saying, and it goes, comfort is the enemy of success. And when you look around at the people who are comfortable in living in their delusion, they're not very successful in many other areas of their lives. Like a lot of those black liberals that were, sounding like CNN, like saying, "Oh, I don't believe the news of the mainstream media lies and this and that," but they believed every disparaging thing they said about Trump, though, right? And it's like you're comfortable living in this delusion and you've bought into it and you've been so vocal about it and you've been so gung ho about it that now that the truth is slapping you in the face, you're mad at the person that's telling you the truth rather than being mad at the people that lied to you. You know, every election cycle, these liberals get on TV and start on social media and start selling their racism and pushing their racial narrative. And it's all coming from the political left, again, who has been the most racist throughout American history. And it's an amazing thing to see. It's an amazing thing to see grown adults act so mindlessly. It's like they depend on this class of superhumans to do all the thinking for them, and they lack the ability to think for themselves. And anybody who dares to think for themselves, well, now they have to be beaten back in line. They got to be whipped back onto the plantation by being called names, by being bullied, being disparaged, being censored, and all of that. And I call this stream the business of being a truther because the conspiracy theory category, quote unquote, on social media has become a bit of a business because we found ourselves as content creators, we found ourselves a niche, and we found an audience that's willing to support the truth and willing to fund the platforms that are actually putting out real truth. And this is why I always say, the fake news media like Don Lemon and them on CNN, they get millions of dollars a year to lie to you and read a script, and I barely can get $100 a show, but I can't afford to tell you a lie because if I tell you a lie, I won't even be able to get that. Yeah, Brother Lee says, I remember when I first said that Michelle Obama was a trans. Oh my God. Yeah, people were pissed off about it. But there's so much overwhelming evidence to prove that there's no denying it at this point. But there's still people out there that will deny it and argue you down in defense of this man pretending to be a woman who fooled the entire world for 8 years. Now, to Brother Lee's comment about Terrence Howard, Brother Sanchez actually discussed the Terrence Howard thing, and I I tend to agree with him. I'm on his side when it comes to that because yeah, what he said about the pandemic and about the sacred geometry stuff, it might have been true. It might have been true, but here's how they deceive you. His purpose is to undermine Brother Sanchez's message. His purpose is to undermine the teachings of the ancient cosmology and the sacred geometry. And because so many people are catching on to the ancient cosmology and the sacred geometry, the establishment is now going to use its puppets. Excuse me. The establishment is now going to use its puppets to basically overshadow and override the true teachings of ancient cosmology. And this is why Terrence Howard, in all his studies of sacred geometry and all that cool shit that he says, he remains a globe earther because it's not his job to sell the flat earth. In fact, it's his job to do the opposite, which is sell the globe earth. So he's going to say all this cool shit that resonates with the people because the truth resonates with real truth seekers, but he's going to throw in that lie of globe earth because he wants to gain the trust of his audience by giving them things that they can verify that are real, but then he's going to he's going to use that trust and betray those people's trust in order to prop up the establishment lie, which is the globe earth. And the fact that the establishment is going to such lengths to promote Hollywood actors and big platforms to try to sell the globe earth. I mean, that should tell you right there that they're afraid of the flat earth truth coming out. They're afraid of it because once people realize their true power, it's over for the establishment. Malcolm X said it himself, right? Like, take voting, for example. There's millions of people in America that vote, and there's probably millions more that don't vote. But if everybody was on the same page and were willing to get involved in their elections, even on the voting side and on the counting the vote side. And we were all on the same page and knew what would work best for the country. You know, we wouldn't have an election fraud issue because there wouldn't be anybody willing to defraud American citizens of their sacred right to vote in order to make sure that an establishment puppet gets that position of power rather than a true representative of the people who the people chose to represent them. This is where you get the saying that, our leaders aren't elected, they're selected, and blah 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 blah. And to a degree, that's true because it's the political parties that choose the candidates that they want to run for office. So the political parties, whoever's in charge of the political parties behind the scenes, they're the ones that do the selecting. And this is why I tend to lean on the side of people who don't want to be affiliated with political parties. But if all we have is the Democrats and the Republicans, and all we see is lies and evil and deception from the Democratic Party, but from the Republican Party, we see a little bit of the other stuff, a little bit of real results. I would tend to lean on the side of the lesser evil, right? It's basically come down to that in American politics, where it's choosing between the lesser of two evils. And for the people who say, I'm not going to choose and I don't want to get involved, I think it's foolish. And even Malcolm X thought it was foolish because what they don't realize is you staying out of the process has less of an effect on the process than you getting involved in the process, right? And when you get involved in the process, your voice is now heard. And if you want the politicians in office to do your bidding as the people, you got to have something to bargain with. And to those politicians, the only thing that the people have to bargain with is their votes. And this is why they do all that pandering and all that propaganda and campaigning and all that shit, because they understand that. But for the people that stay out of politics and don't get involved in voting, not even on the local level, I'm talking about on the local level where it's even more important. You get overlooked because you have no bargaining chips. You've removed yourself from the table, you're no longer in the game. And once that happens, that clears the way for the greater evil to take over because the greater evil is always sold in a prettier package. So, if those of you who are well versed and well studied enough to know just how corrupt our government is and how corrupt these political parties are and how corrupt these politicians are, for you to not get involved in your own local politics is basically leaving the door open for people who don't know how corrupt these politicians are, don't know how corrupt these political parties are, and don't know how corrupt these politicians, these individuals that are running for office are. Guess what? They're going to vote for whoever sells them the prettiest package. So, in essence, if the only choice we have is the lesser of two evils, and you don't consciously choose the lesser evil, the greater evil will always be chosen for you. And this is why we have so many communities in this country that are being ruled over by evil tyrants and crooked politicians that everybody complains about, but nobody wants to go vote out of office, or at least attempt to vote out of office. That's like seeing your country being attacked. There's another country waging war on your country. You know what that invading army is doing is wrong. You know what that invading army is doing is bad. And you know that if nobody steps up to try to resist them, they're going to seize ultimate power and enslave everybody. But in hoping that that invading army doesn't enslave everybody, at the same time, you decide that you're not going to get involved in the fight. How are you going to win the war if you don't get involved in it? And that's been my message all along when it comes to politics. And it's like, you don't even have to go out and vote. There's for every American that says, I'm not voting, I'm not getting involved in politics, they have at least 3 to 5 people in their immediate circle, even in their own household, possibly, that do vote and do get involved in politics. So why not be a guiding light for them? You know, why not be a source of knowledge for them? Since you have all this knowledge and they don't, they're going to go out and they're going to foolishly vote for the candidate that's going to enslave them. But if you know that, and you know what these people are about, why not make yourself a resource, a source of information and knowledge to the people around you in your immediate circle who do vote? You see what I'm saying? So you can still get involved in your local politics and be effective politically without even casting a ballot. But most people that choose to stay out of politics think that they're immune to the politics and think that the politics, what up, Bulls Gotti? And think that the politics won't affect them. But it does. Look at the people in New York City. And I'm glad Bullets Gotti came in because he can verify this. Look at the people in New York City that's being overrun by illegals. Many of those people didn't vote for Eric Adams because they don't vote and they don't want to get involved in politics. But guess what? Many more went out and voted for Eric Adams, and now Eric Adams is in there fucking up the city. And everybody's suffering, the voters and non-voters alike. Going to your town hall meetings, that's very effective too, because these politicians, they don't want to hear from the people who oppose them. They don't want to hear from the people at all. In fact, they want to be able to do whatever they want and not have anybody say it and not have anybody say anything. But when the people show up to the town hall meetings and make their voices heard, guess what? The politicians fold. Eric Adams, his administration in New York City wanted to take a foreclosed apartment building in Harlem and open it up to the illegals. And the people of Harlem came out to the town hall meeting and were like, hell no, we don't want this shit in our community. We don't want these people in our community. And guess what? Eric Adams had to pull back on that plan. He couldn't go forward with it because he knew now that the people were against it. So he had no choice. Now imagine if nobody showed up to that town hall meeting. Guess what? That whole apartment building that could be housing American citizens would have been used to house illegals while homeless Americans still had to sleep on the streets of New York. But the people got involved. Or how about the brother from Tampa, Florida, that went to or not Tampa, from Cape Canaveral, Florida, went to the town hall meeting and attempted to expose NASA with their fakery. That was just one man. So he didn't have much of an effect. But imagine if 1,000 people showed up to that town hall meeting and all 1,000 people were saying what he was saying. Guess what? Those politicians would have had no choice but to look into it and but to start investigating it. But guess what? It was just one man because nobody else wanted to get involved. And this is why, for the most part, for the majority of our lives, we, the people, have been losing this political fight. This is the reason why, because there's too many people out there that are what I would like to call a little too smart for their own good. They think they know it all and they think they got it all figured out. So they think they can skate by and ignore, they think they can skate by and while ignoring what their government, the players that their government is putting in place to do their dirty work for them. You can't, because everybody's going to suffer under the weight of these bad political decisions. So you're actually acting against your own best interests. Malcolm X, during the civil rights era, he made he was doing an interview and he made several statements that really hit home for me. And he said that in America at the time, there were 11 million eligible black voters. 11 million eligible black voters. Out of those 11 million eligible black voters, and this was after the voting rights got passed and everything, only about 3 million black people actually turned out to vote. And he said, do you understand the political power the Negro in America would have if all 11 million, or hell, even 7 million out of that 11 million turned out to vote and voted as a collective? And it's true. And this is why these liberals, these Democrats, have been able to maintain power in certain parts of the country, because the black vote in a lot of states is the deciding vote as to who gets power, because of all the other racial groups, of all the other demographics, they're generally split 50-50 between the liberal side and the conservative side. And it's the black vote that's normally the deciding vote. So, yes, you might be the minority in the group, but you could have the strongest political voice if the group is split 50-50 and you're the outlier. But because there's too many people that's fallen for what I call the wokey doke, where they believe that, you know, if I stay away from politics and just completely ignore politics, all these bad politicians are going to go away and I could somehow insulate myself and live off the land and all this and that. Sure, you might be able to do that for a while, but what happens when a corrupt governor gets elected in your state and says, you know what, everybody that's living off grid, we're going to bring them back into the fold, or we're going to throw them in prison. Guess what? Now you're on the run. Now you're a fugitive. But if the people who lived in the city and the people who lived off the land saw the value of being able to live off the land and elected politicians who were willing to not use the force of government to stop people from living off the land, guess what? Now you could be able to live off the land. Now you'd be able to enjoy your freedoms and your rights and your private property rights and all that shit. This is why I mean the gun thing is the best example I can give you. And this is one of those fundamental differences between the Democratic platform and the Republican platform, where the Democratic platform believes that it's government's job to protect us, so the people don't need to own the people don't need any private ownership of firearms, because the police and the military are the only ones that should have the guns, even though we don't trust the government. It's the stupidest shit in the world. But that's their premise. That's their position when it comes to gun rights. So in states that are ran by Democratic politicians, you have more strict gun laws and less rights, less gun ownership, less rights to the second, less access to your Second Amendment right. But then you go to other states like Georgia or Kentucky or something who have a constitutional carry or open carry. Those politicians in those states, majority of them happen to be Republicans, and they actually respect the Second Amendment and understand that government can't be trusted, and they shouldn't have a monopoly on force, and the citizens should have a right to protect themselves as well. So in that sense, the people that voted for those Republican politicians actually get to reap the benefit of having private gun ownership and being able to exercise their Second Amendment. On the economic side, it's the same thing, where the Democratic Party believes that high ass taxes and everybody giving their money to the government is going to amount to the government doing the right thing for the people, as long as the government can get all the money that it needs from out of the people to do what it has to do for the people. But all it amounts to is high ass taxes, which equals high ass rent and high ass prices on everything else. And eventually, those local governments run out of money because the wealthier people who have the ability to pay these high ass taxes don't want to give all their money away to the government. So what do? They pack up and they leave and they go to a Republican state where taxes are lower and they get to keep more of their money. And this is what led to states like or cities like New York City having such limited jobs, even though they're so heavily populated. New York City is a huge economy. I think it's what, 9 million people that live in the city of New York. It's by itself alone. That's a lot of people, but the jobs just aren't there because the taxes, the fees that the government charges people to have businesses and run businesses are so expensive that it's not even worth having a business there. It's like if I'm a store owner and I'm making so much money that I'm now considered rich, and the government decides that Since I'm rich now, I have to pay more taxes. And they decide that they're going to up my tax bill from 20% to 50% of my profits. Now that's half of my profits I have to hand over to the government for them to do God knows what with. Meanwhile, the politicians on the back end are getting rich through insider trading, but that's another story, right? So now I have to give the government more money. But let's say I move to a place, I open up my store in a state where they weren't these big tax the rich Democrats running the show, and they were more conservative minded, business minded people. Mostly, you'll find those types of people amongst Republicans. Um, and they decide that, you know what, let's not tax these business owners at 20%. Let's lower their taxes down to 10%. You know what will happen? More businesses from those high tax states are going to come to the low tax state, which means the tax base just increased. So instead of having one business paying 50% in taxes, you'll have five different businesses all paying 10%, which still amounts to that 50%. So the government still gets to raise the revenue that they want, but the added benefit through the ripple effects of that would be more businesses able to operate, more jobs for the people, and more room for those businesses to expand. So let's say I have plans to expand my business because I'm making so much money, but the state of New York decides they want 50% of my profits. Now I have to take 50% of the money I'm making and hand it over to the government, right? I can't expand my business anymore because instead of putting my money back into my business, I have to now put it into the government, which is foolish because if you don't trust the government, why do you want them in control so much, had to have so much control over your money? But you see, the liberal minded people that buy into this propaganda don't think that far ahead. So let's say now I'm making all this money and I want to expand my business, and the local government decides, the state government decides to cut my taxes down to 10%. So now I'm paying less taxes, which means I'm making even more money. Guess what? Now I can open up that other store, hire a whole new staff of people to run and operate that store. And thus, my greed essentially has now created more jobs. And in tough economic times, that's what people need. Not just jobs, but good paying jobs. But you'll never have that in an economy where it's based off of tax the rich. And these are the types of truths that people don't want to hear, especially those liberal voters that love voting for these big government Democrats. They believe that government is the solution to all their problems, and that's simply not true. In fact, the opposite is true. Government is is the root cause of the majority of problems people have. In states like California and New York and Florida, where rent's so fucking high. Well, Florida is kind of a different animal. But rent's very high in Florida, not because the taxes are high, but in fact because the taxes are low and so many people in such a short period of time fled there and inflated the economy. But in states like California and New York, where rent has been consistently high for several years, several decades, in fact, that's that stems from the tax to rich policy, where the state government decides that they want to raise the taxes on people who have a certain who are above a certain net worth, and that would be your property owners, your business owners, and so on. So now this class of people who are making these properties available for other people to rent, working class folks to rent from them so they can have a place to live, they now have to pay higher taxes. So what do they do to make up for that lost revenue? They're going to raise the prices. Excuse me. They're going to raise the prices on their consumers and clients. So the tax the rich policy, in terms of landlords being, taxed because they're supposedly rich, it ends up hurting the tenants and hurting the renters and hurting the working people who are actually looking for places to rent, because now the landlord has to raise the rent in order to keep up with the tax hikes. And in raising the rent, now you have working class folks who were able to make a decent living in the past. unable to do so, all because their landlord has to pay more taxes. And it's crazy how it works. It's crazy how the economics of it all breaks down. But once you really look into it and delve into it, you'll see what I'm saying is absolutely true. But back to the Terrence Howard thing. Terrence Howard, Orlando Brown, Jaguar Wright, Cat Williams, all these so-called truthers that are now coming out and telling all these profound truths. You got to remember, they're not really there to appeal to us with the advanced knowledge. They're there to appeal to the people who who lack that basic knowledge, who lack that advanced knowledge. And the only good thing that comes out of what they're doing is they're getting the conversation started with people who wouldn't even think to have that conversation in the first place. But the disservice that they're doing is at the same time as they're opening up the conversation, they're also injecting the propaganda and the lies into the conversation. You see what I'm saying? So they're giving you some truth, but they're not giving you the truth that you actually need. On the lesser side of that deception, what they do is they act like they're awake and they're for the people and they're giving the people the truth and blah 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 blah, when in reality they're not saying anything that we don't already know. So they're not bringing any form of enlightenment. They're just regurgitating and repeating. That's not helpful in this truther, in this truther journey that we're taking. What's helpful is bringing knowledge to the people that we didn't have before, so we can start tying the pieces together with the knowledge that we already do have. You see what I'm saying? And that's where you make the real intellectual progress. That's where the awakening really happens. So on the surface, it might seem like the Terrence Howards and all the other celebrities that I named are actually helping to awaken the people. But in reality, they're really not. They're kickstarting that process in the minds of a lot of people, but they're kickstarting that process for the purpose of making these people believe they now have the truth and they need not look any further. I don't need to examine what these Hollywood celebrities are really into and the Satanism and all that, because I already know, because Cat Williams told me. But what Cat Williams didn't tell you is about the baby trafficking, the human sacrifice. What Cat Williams didn't tell you is about the international child trafficking trade. He didn't really mention much about that. He talked about how the business scams people and rips people off. He talked about how, you know, people are kept in a certain box and not allowed to talk about certain subjects. He talked about how some people get blackballed and so on and so forth for, speaking up and telling the truth. But we already know this. What truth do you have to bring, Cat Williams? What truth are you bringing to the conversation, Terrence Howard? Absolutely nothing that we don't already know. And when you look at what they bring in its entirety, there's that globe earth bullshit. And I told you guys before, anybody online, whether they be a celebrity or a regular person or whoever, if they're claiming to be giving you the truth and they're claiming to know the truth, but they don't allow you to question the globe, or they don't encourage you to question the globe, they're not really bringing you the truth. You see, the establishment has been watching the alternative media just as closely as many of you have. So they know what's being said. They know what's resonating with the people. They know what's spreading amongst the people and what's going viral. So guess what? Now they know the talking points. Now they know what to say to grab the people's attention away from the real truther, the real truth tellers, and kind of herd them right back into the celebrity worship category. What do you think Terrence Howard is doing? I don't know if you guys can hear that thunder, but it's pretty bad out here. But it's a very elaborate deception. I mean, take Bruce Jenner for example. When he's not pretending to be Caitlyn Jenner, but he tried to run for governor of California as a Republican and was saying everything that conservative Republican voters wanted to hear. And there was a lot of conservatives buying into that bullshit and saying, you know what? I'd vote for Caitlyn Jenner. He seems to know what's going on and have the right idea and blah, 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 blah. Completely ignoring the fact that Bruce Jenner, aka Caitlyn Jenner, is an individual that doesn't know whether to sit down or stand up to pee. Doesn't know which bathroom to use and doesn't know whether to sit down or stand up to pee. But this is the person you believe would do a better job running your state? No. They were what the Democratic Party was doing was they were preparing themselves for a political seat change because the Democratic Party has done so much out in the open and exposed themselves to such a degree that they know they're losing favor with the voters, with the electorate. And because the electorate is limited to just Republican versus Democrat, guess what these Democrats are going to do now? They're going to start running Democratic operatives pretending to be Republicans. And that's exactly who Caitlyn Jenner, who Bruce Jenner is. Because on the Republican conservative side of things, we don't play that trans gentleman game. We don't believe in that shit. Your name is Bruce and you have a penis. But to see conservative voters actually supporting Bruce Jenner for governor of California without a thought, excuse me, it just goes to show how effective the talking points are. So once the enemy operatives learn the talking points, they can then use those talking points to gain favor with the people in order to keep themselves in power. So just because somebody's online talking all that good shit doesn't mean that they have good intentions, and it also doesn't mean that they even understand that good shit that they're talking about or believe it for that matter. It was so disappointing to see so many conservatives actually throw their support behind a trans gentleman, a trans general. Shout out to Minister Jack for that, the trans gentleman. It was crazy. We're supposed to be about the sanctity of marriage. We're supposed to be about pro-life. We're supposed to be about marriage being between a man and a woman, and we're supporting a man pretending to be a woman. How does that make any sense? And a healthy distrust of these celebrities is a good place to start. Because you got to remember, if they were not truly a part of the establishment, they wouldn't have the amount of wealth and notoriety that they have. And that's facts. They wouldn't. Because there's other celebrities out there who have been vocal publicly about things that we know to be true. And they don't get half the shine as the liars and the deceivers. Because again, we exist as truthers in a world built on lies. So in the business of being a truther, you have to be able to read between the lines. You have to be able to sift through the real shit and the bullshit. And it's kind of like an art, you know. You browse on social media and you see things and you have to determine the validity of these things you're seeing. Otherwise, you're going to end up like a lot of other failing platforms that, you know, put out information just because they heard it through the grapevine, not knowing what the real story is. And then when the real story finally does come out, they look like idiots. And they lose credibility because now they were wrong about something. And that's the other hard part about being a truther too, is you can't miss. You can't afford to miss because these truths are so profound and so groundbreaking, and they overturn a lot of what we've been taught our whole lives, that people actually look for a way to discredit the truth that truthers are sharing with them in order to keep believing, in order to justify their desire to keep believing in the lie. So when you're breaking stuff down to people and you're giving them the truth, you cannot afford to miss a beat. Because if you get one thing wrong, they're going to latch on to that one thing you got wrong and use that as the, what's the word I'm looking for? Use that as the standard of measure to determine the validity of everything else you said. But all in all, being a truther, being in the business of being a truther, it's not easy. It's not an easy existence at all. And that's how I know that I'm on to the truth and what I'm sharing is the truth. Not only do I have my research to back me up, not only do I have the receipts to back me up, not only do I have a solid handle on what's occurring in the world based on the current events we read about, but oh shit. Damn, I forgot what I was gonna say. I'm losing my train of thought. I was saying, fuck, what the hell was I saying? But I don't get the shine, the promotion, and the notoriety that the liars and the deceivers get. I think that's where I was going with that. You know, so as true and factual as my reports are, there's still more people out there that would rather go with the lie because the people telling the lie get millions of views. Whereas the people telling the truth barely get any views at all. So if nobody wants to watch them, why would I? And one thing that you really got to take into consideration is you really, really, as a truther, you really have to, again, you can't miss a beat, but you also have to be careful as to how you approach the conversations. And you have to be very, very astute at knowing your audience. Is that the word, astute? You have to be able to determine who your audience is and how you should approach this conversation, because some people can't take it all at once like that. You got to give it to them in little doses. You give it to them in little doses, but you give them enough to where they have a framework to start doing their own research. And the smart people out there will do the research and they will find the truth and they will realize that they've been living a delusion, and they'll be intellectually honest enough to admit that they've been living in a delusion and break themselves out of that delusion. But if you approach it the wrong way and try to hit them with too much too quick, they'll reject it. Because remember, the beliefs that they've been taught their whole lives also come with that defense mechanism that says anything that goes against this is false and should be rejected. So that's going to be their first natural response, their first natural instinct, because this is what they believe. They believe this lie that they've been holding on to be true. And they also believe that anybody who believes otherwise or doesn't believe in this lie that they hold to be true, well, something's wrong with that person. Huma Mansuri podcast says, you don't need groupthink for truth. It stands alone. Right. It stands alone. Exactly. And this is why when you look at the flat earth versus the globe earth community, let me just go back there for a second. When you look at the flat earth versus the globe earth community, the flat earthers tend to be a bit more divided, a bit more split up, a bit more independent. Whereas when you look at the globe earther community, well, they're all in league with each other. They all communicate and collaborate with each other more often than not. Because in order to sell the lie and make it believable, they need a group of people saying the same thing to give the public the impression that, well, if this group of people are all saying the exact same thing, even though they're all just telling the same lie, it could appear true. It could be accepted as truth. It's like creating a false consensus is what they're doing. And on the political side of things, with the liberals and the conservatives who manifest themselves in the political parties as Democrats and Republicans, what you'll find is on the conservative side of things, there's more independent free thought, as opposed to on the liberal side of things, everybody is on the same page, whether they believe it or not, because nobody is allowed to object. So there's no free thought on the political left. And that in itself is mental slavery. And this is what the essence of being a truther is really all about. It's about breaking people out of their mental slavery. It's about freeing people's minds from that mental slavery, reintroducing the idea of free thought. Excuse me. Because when it comes to politics, the majority of voters out there, whether Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative, they don't have free thought. I mean, the majority of conservatives, I would say, have free thought, but as far as the liberals, they don't have free thought. Doesn't exist in the liberal realm. They're not allowed to think for themselves. And demonizing people who dare to think for themselves and take an opposing opinion, that is cult-like behavior. And the opposite to that would be telling people, listen, this is where I stand, but do your own research and choose your own stance. And like I said, the one thing that makes it the most difficult to be a truther is the fact that not everybody wants the truth. Most people don't want the truth. They want you to lie to them, or at least distract them from the truth that's being exposed. This is why celebrity gossip gets more views than political commentary. And the thing is, if we have an establishment that rules over us, that's so powerful and in control of just about everything, why would they be afraid of being exposed and having the truth come out about them? Well, it's quite simple. They're so afraid of the truth because the truth is what's going to literally set the people free. Like the Bible says, the truth shall set you free. And they don't want us to be free. They want us to be entrapped in the beliefs that they fed us so we can act the way that they need us to act. Just like with the pandemic, right? They made everybody believe it was real and everybody reacted as if it was real. But they're afraid of the truth because they know that their entire system is propped up on lies. And the more and more people who find the truth is going to amount to the more and more people turning away from their system. And I don't mean turning away from their system as in ignoring them and allowing them to operate, but rather turning away from their system by no longer arguing with the truthers and defending the lies, but rather doing their own investigation and engaging in free thought. Because if more people did their own investigations and engaged in free thought, there'd be a lot more people on the internet like me. But guess what? There aren't. We're just a few, we're just a handful. And it's going to take us at least a couple generations to get the whole world fully awakened. And that's going to, and that's the way that is because we need to share this truth with our children. Your children are going to listen to you, but other adults won't because they're too set in their ways in most cases. Why do you think the establishment targets children with their propaganda? Why do you think they're in the elementary schools trying to teach little boys that they could be little girls? Because they know that children are impressionable, and they know that if they can captivate the minds of these children young with the lie, that lie is going to ring true to them for the entirety of their lives. I mean, even for us flat earthers, we were taught about the globe when we were too young to question it. And we spent our entire lives believing in it until we became free thinking adults and decided to engage in our own research. And we learned something different. We learned that what we were taught was not exactly true. And so we changed our stance and we moved away from what the establishment wanted us to believe. And it seems simple in theory to say it, but in reality, to actually execute that level of awakening is very, very, again, it's a tedious process. It's a difficult process. It's a painful process. And you suffer a lot of losses in the meantime. I don't know if you guys can hear that storm raging outside, but it's coming down, man. Puma says, "Truth comes, we can't hear it. How can we hear it when we've been programmed to fear it?" Exactly, and that's the defense mechanism in the lies that we've been taught. That defense mechanism is what programs us to fear the truth because it's not really the truth that we fear per se, but rather the reaction from others who we decide to share that truth with. That's the main fear. And that was done on purpose. That belief system was put in the minds of the people by the establishment in order to make sure that people reject the truth. We literally live in a world where the truth is treated like lies and the lies are treated like truth. Every single thing that YouTube censors off their platform is true information, factual information. But then when you go look at the fictional shit, like the Globe Earth and all that other shit, those guys get millions of views, heavily monetized, heavily promoted. Because it's in the best interest of the establishment to keep the lie propped up. And because it's in the establishment's best interest to keep the lie propped up, they then tailored their system to make it as difficult as possible for us to be truth tellers. So much so that they came up with a disparaging label they called truther. Yeah, it is really coming down outside, man. I hope I don't lose connection here. Can't even use the Wi-Fi because the freaking power's out. That's why I'm having to do the talk like this, and we barely got 36 people watching between YouTube and Rumble. Hold on, let me go check the numbers and see what we're looking like. Give me 1 second. All right, so we got 36 on YouTube, 30 likes. It's not bad. Oh, nice. We got 43 over on Rumble, so we're looking pretty decent. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. All right. So we're doing pretty good. So the number I'm seeing on StreamYard is my YouTube views, and we got about the same amount of people, a little bit more over on Rumble. So it's not a bad night at all. Not a bad night at all. But again, the first thing they did to my YouTube channel when I decided to get involved in this journey of truth and decided to be a truther on YouTube, the first thing YouTube did was, well, my first experience with the censorship was when I started making videos on Facebook. And I was blowing up on Facebook. I'm talking 10,000, 11,000 views within a day type shit. Then all of a sudden my views dropped down to like 350, 450. So I knew I was being shadow banned. This was back in early 2018, like mid to late 2018, actually. And then by December 2018, I fired up the YouTube channel and started doing YouTube videos and YouTube streams. I was able to monetize within a few months. And the first thing YouTube did to me was in my second month of monetization, they took away my monetization. Then they started zapping my videos. Then they started zapping my channels. And this is why my numbers stay so low, because they keep shadow banning me and zapping my videos, zapping my channels. And I keep having to restart over from scratch because they know as long as they keep me in that box and as long as they can keep my voice suppressed, the lie will continue to spread and perpetuate and solidify as truth in the minds of the masses, because they don't like people like me and they don't want people like me out there. They make it as difficult as possible. And this is how the system protects itself from the truthers who are actually putting out the real information and exposing what the system is trying to do. They simply suppress the truth and promote the lies. The Globe Earth Flat Earth debate on YouTube proves that without a shadow of a doubt. And in demonetizing me, they reduced me down to the point where I have to beg for donations. This is why I ask you guys to hit the Cash App and hit the PayPal, hit the Venmo, and support the show. It wasn't my intention to come on here and have to e-beg, but once I realized how difficult they were going to make this, I realized how important it was, how important the support of the people was going to be, how much support I was going to need from the people. And for the most part, you guys have been very supportive, because it's nothing short of impressive that I can actually make $100 or $200 a show with less than 100 people in my chat room. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's nothing short of impressive. And that's only because the people who I was able to reach and wake up, and the other people who want to wake others up, they see the value and they see the importance of my content. So they choose to support me financially, which is great, because it allows me, again, to do the research, take time off work, do the broadcast, stay up late at night with you guys, share the information. And that allows me to remain in competition with the establishment puppets who are being handsomely rewarded by this corrupt system. It all boils down to the grassroots power, people power. That's what it all boils down to. JDM says, seems like YouTube is running a 5-year plan to get the platform in lockstep with mainstream narrative. Yeah, it seems like it. And I don't even think it's 5 years, JDM. I think the faster they can push you into producing mainstream content, the better. And that's what the censorship is all about, because when you stray away from the mainstream narrative and start telling that pesky truth, they'll just flag you. They'll just report your channel, take you down, make you water down your content. And that's kind of the play, right? They put pressure on you to force you to water down your content, to deter you from talking about certain subjects, and thus the lie gets to perpetuate. Like during the scamdemic, for example, there was plenty of people on YouTube, including myself, sharing actual, real, factual information with the people from this same scientific establishment that was pushing the scamdemic and pushing the lies. And they started censoring the shit out of people. Even me. They came up with this term called medical misinformation and used that as their excuse to censor anybody that was challenging their false narrative. And thus the narrative got to spread. You know, and I noticed, you know, other streams that would put out hardcore truth, they can't really do that anymore, because certain words you just can't say anymore. They made it to where it's impossible to talk about these topics. But thanks to and they use algorithms and bots to run most of their censorship. But thanks to human intelligence, we were able to circumvent their censorship in a way and not water down our content, but at the same time maintain good standing by not using those certain key trigger words. So we came up with a system of code words. And that just goes to show you how difficult it is to be in the business of being a truther, because it hardly pays, and the amount of work that's needed is extraordinary. So it's like one of those jobs where it's low pay, long hours, and you could lose your life behind this shit. Hell, there's already been an attempt on my life. And God knows how many other attempts that went unnoticed by me. You know what I'm saying? So if your intention is to get involved in the business, and I call it a business because we can't do this shit for free. The establishment loves the poor righteous teacher, because in the wise words of Petey Green, you can't do nothing if you're broke. So the establishment doesn't care what you say or what you do as an individual, because if you don't have the funding to challenge them, you're not really that big of a threat. All they got to do is shut down your voice, suppress your voice on the internet, and they win. Why do you think they coming at Donald Trump so hard for his money? Because you can't do nothing if you're broke. And they will try to break you. If you get into the business of being a truther, they will try to break you. So make sure you got something else going on outside of social media if you plan to become a truther on social media. Believe me, because there was a time when I was making so much money on YouTube, I was ready to quit my whole trade, sell all my equipment, and sit at home behind the computer making this money and doing these streams and sharing this truth out. And I'm glad I didn't, because that run only lasted about 4 or 5 months before they started shutting me down. Then guess what? I had to go back to work, rely on my trade to continue being able to make a living. They incentivize the liars and they disincentivize the truthers. And that lets you know who you need to be supporting. That lets you know where your support should lie. I mean, shit, it's the American way to support the underdog. And there ain't no bigger underdog in this country than your average American truth seeker and truth teller. We're the underdogs. But oddly enough, as the underdogs up against this big monstrous machine with practically total control over who gets to say what, somehow we're still winning. Somehow we're still getting the truth out. And like I was going to say earlier, if you plan to get into the business of being a truther, be prepared for some hard times to fall upon thee, because they will. Because once they see that you're actually having an effect, and once they see that people are actually following your message, and once they see that people are actually supporting you, they're going to come at you, and they're going to come at you with everything they got. You know why YouTube started snatching all my channels down so quickly? It was because of the money. There was a time when I would track that shit. And every time I would go 3 streams in a row and make $300 per show, the third stream would get snatched down, and then I'd get suspended for a week or two. And then during that suspension period, they would snatch down more videos, give me more strikes, and then disappear my whole channel. I'd fire up another channel, and then they'll knock it down again as soon as I start making too much money. Because it was literally upsetting them that I was able to not only get the truth out, but also be able to raise revenue as well. And it was because of that ability to raise revenue, getting this truth out, is what allowed me to make it to the steps of the Capitol on January 6th. Yes, I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I got a whole stream showing the video clips that I took when I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I know the story. I saw the players. But because January 6th was one of their big events that they were going to lie about to push their narrative, they needed to suppress anybody that was putting out the truth about January 6th. And guess what? I ultimately ended up losing that channel. But thank God that I got everything up on Rumble. You guys can find that stream on Rumble. So you got to be prepared to take a lot of lumps if it's your intention to get into the truther business. And again, I call it a business because it's impossible to do it for free. It's impossible. It can be done, but it can't be done for long, and it's not sustainable. Because it takes time and it takes effort. And if you try to do it for free, you'll be able to last for a little while, but after that, you're not going to be able to continue doing it because the demands of life are going to start kicking your ass. And you're going to have, as an adult, as a responsible adult, you'll have financial obligations that you need to meet, and you won't be able to meet them if you're spending all your time on the internet sharing information rather than in the field earning revenue. But we can supercharge our information sharing abilities. And the way that we supercharge our information sharing ability is by incentivizing those who are sharing the real information. You people, the people, are the counterweight, the counterbalance to the YouTube algorithm shutting truthers down. And it's up to you to hit that Cash App and hit that PayPal and hit that Venmo and support your truthers, not just me. You know, when I say support the show, I'm not just talking about me. I'm talking about any truther show. You know, I was a little annoyed that Brother Sanchez stole my line that I stole from Angry Man. You know, hit the Cash App and support the show. But I'm kind of glad that he's promoting himself more because he's got a large enough audience and he now has the ability to earn and generate that kind of revenue. And I applaud that brother for that because I was following him since he was like below 50,000 subscribers on the come up, and now he's well over 100,000, and he's done pretty well for himself. And he's a shining example of defying the odds and challenging the system in a real way to where you can garner a large following and build yourself a platform where you have a louder voice and you're able to get the truth out. And I don't agree with everything he says. He doesn't agree with everything I say. But you know what I do agree with? I agree with the fact that he was willing. There was a time when he was willing to do it for free, and he's earned his keep. Because I'm kind of in the same boat. There was a time when I first started on YouTube that I was willing and able to do it for free, and I earned my keep, and I made lots of money with a fraction of the subscribers that Sanchez got. But it's getting to a point now where the economy is taking a dip. Life's gotten so hard. Things have gotten so expensive that people don't really donate to truthers anymore. Because most people just don't have it to give. And that's understandable. That's totally understandable. But $1 won't hurt. $2 won't hurt. Can't buy shit with $1, $2 nowadays anyway. So why not put it to something that you can actually benefit from? Because in knowing the truth, there's benefits to it. I mean, imagine all those people that got censored for talking about the smacks and the JAB and all those people who were on the fence about whether they should take it or not, that ultimately decided not to take it because they heard some truther putting out information about it and ended up saving their lives. There's a huge benefit to knowing the truth. What's up, Maurice? Good to see you, bro. And that's kind of and that's a bit paradoxical now that I think about it too, because you benefit greatly from knowing the truth and being able to apply the real information to your everyday life. But when it comes to sharing that truth and sharing that information, usually it ends up being to your detriment. Like sometimes I sit back and wonder, like those nights when I make like $10, $15 off a 3-hour stream and shit. And I sit back and think like, man, you know, if when I started on YouTube, I started making comedy and clown sketches and shit like the rest, like Country Wayne and the rest of them, I'd have been a multi-millionaire right now. Chilling, living good. But I would have been up in my ivory tower, enjoying the spoils of me selling out while watching the rest of the world go to shit. I can't enjoy wealth while everybody else around me is suffering. I'm not that kind of person. And I always say there's two types of wealthy people in the world. There's the rich people that don't want competition, so they want to be the richest one in the room. And then there's the rich people that want to see everybody else make it too. And I like to think of myself as the latter because it warms my heart to see somebody go from nothing to something. You know, I like that shit. That brings me joy and happiness. Because at the end of the day, I want us all to make it. And I want us all to make it through this trying time. And I want us all to come out better people at the end of this all. And I want all of us who have kids, I want our children to grow up knowing what we didn't learn till we were in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, you know, well into our adulthood. Because had I known what I know, had I known at age 15 what I had learned by the time I was 30, I'd be light years ahead of where I am right now. But unfortunately, there wasn't too many people around to teach me and school me on these things, so I had to go through the hardships and learn them on my own. And this is another reason why being a truther is so important. Because it's one thing to know the truth, but it's something totally different when you decide to share the truth. It's like being in a village full of starving people and you got a sandwich. You can go home and you can eat that sandwich and enjoy that sandwich and live another day. But is life worth living if you go to bed on a full stomach and everybody else goes to bed starving and then you wake up the next morning and half the village is expired because they starved to death? Are you really going to feel good about yourself because you had that sandwich all to yourself while watching your fellow villagers drop dead from starvation? Probably not. And that's kind of how it is for me with knowing these things and sharing this information with people, because I'm watching my village starve and I got this whole box full of sandwiches and I'm just trying to give them sandwiches out. But the downside to that is somebody's going to try to come take all those sandwiches for themselves, because there will always be somebody who will be much happier watching the village starve and being the only one with food, because now they don't have to share. Now they're not obligated to anybody. Now they have no real responsibility to their fellow man. But for most of us, we're not those kinds of people. And again, and I have to reiterate this again, be mindful of all the pitfalls when you decide to take that step and become a truther. Be very mindful of it, because there's going to be a lot of surprises that are going to come your way that you didn't expect. Like when I started on YouTube, I was talking the basic politics, surface level, Democrat versus Republican, pointing out the differences in the party's ideologies, talking about Trump, being a pro-Trumper, and showing how the establishment hates Trump all of a sudden because he's challenging their agenda. And it led me down a road where I started to discover more things in the political field. I started to learn about the big money players who were funding these politicians, the puppet masters. And as I started to get into that, I found myself in a situation where there was a physical attempt on my life. And honestly, by that point, I had become so knowledgeable of the dangers of sharing the truth that I knew it was a possibility, but it still came as a shock when it happened, because, we tend to fall into this mindset as individuals that, oh, it can't happen to me. Oh, yes, it can. And it almost happened to me. Appreciate it, Art Honesty. Shout out to Art Honesty, dropped me a 20 piece on the Cash App. Appreciate that, Art. It happened to me. They try to take my life. And these are all things you got to take into consideration because for many of us, we got families, we got kids, and if they can't get to you, and this is a mafia that we're up against. This establishment is a mafia. And if they can't get to you, guess what? Guess what the next best thing is? They're going to go after your family. They're going to target your children. They're going to target your wives and your husbands. And they're going to put pressure on the people closest to you in order to get them to start talking you out of doing what you're doing. When I first started making Facebook videos, my dad had a government contract at Orlando International Airport, and we had that contract for about a total of 15 years. And within those 15 years, about the 12th or 13th year was when I really started getting. I wasn't making videos at that point, but I was posting a lot of shit because more and more shit about Obama was starting to come out, like him funding ISIS and all that. And I started posting about it. And that was during the Obama administration, and airports are federal property and they're ran by, the FAA, which is the federal agency. And what happened was they started withholding our payments. The contract was to do, complete these jobs, and every month we'll get a check. And that check was to roll us into the next month to pay all the salaries, maintain the equipment, and, count up our profits. And when those checks didn't come, all those operating costs had to be paid out of pocket. So it created a real financial strain. And in looking back at it, I realized they were leaning on my dad and putting pressure on my dad by withholding his money because of what I was doing online. And it ended up where me and him had several arguments over what I was posting online and how it was affecting his business. So essentially, I've had that happen too, where they leaned on my family members to try to get them to talk me out of doing what I was doing. We were subcontracted with a multi-billion-dollar national company that had all the money they needed in the world. So there was absolutely no reason why our checks were showing up a month late. But they were, because they were doing it on purpose. They were trying to put the screws to us because they didn't want us to have that contract anymore. But because we were under contract, if they were to cancel the contract, they would have to come out of pocket a large amount of money. I'm talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. So instead of doing that, they made it to where we wouldn't have the funds to operate. And the day we couldn't show up to work because we didn't have money to pay the employees, which fortunately never happened, they would be able to cancel the contract with no obligation to us because we would be the ones in breach of contract because we didn't get the jobs done. You see how they play? They play real dirty, real dirty. So these are all the things that you have to take into consideration when you're deciding that you want to get in this game and be a truth teller. It's a dangerous game, and there's a lot of hidden and unseen dangers. Another thing to look out for is you're going to have people that are going to come to your platform, pretend to be your friend, and then they'll turn on you and start flagging you. That's happened to me too. So then you enter into this online thing, this social media thing, with the mindset that nobody is your friend. Everybody is out for themselves and everybody's out to benefit themselves in any way they possibly can. And then that mentality then begins to erode the trust. So that drives a wedge between you and actual like-minded people who really do support you, because now you can't go out and do meet and greets with people anymore because you don't know who's gunning for your head. You can't go out and meet your subscribers or show yourself in public too much or announce where you are publicly and what you're doing and all that shit. Hell, I've gotten to the point where I left Florida and I can't even tell my audience where the fuck I live now. Because they've already come after me more than once in Florida. And that was because I was open and honest about where I live. Now I have to keep that shit a secret. And it's unfortunate and I hate that, but that's just the way it has to be. Because I still have to protect myself. Because what good am I to you if they get to me and they're able to stop me and shut me down and delete me if they so choose? And they've been flagging me so much, my channel's not even big enough for me to even claim that I'm a martyr and that they took me out because of what I was doing online. Because then their excuse is going to be, well, obviously we didn't take him out. He only had X amount of subscribers. So we didn't have to flag him. We didn't have to kill him. He only had X amount of subscribers. He wasn't doing shit. He wasn't affecting nothing to nobody. So why would we come after him? We didn't need to come after him. So they create plausible deniability for themselves. What the fuck was that? Why is it making sounds? Stop making sounds. So by keeping you suppressed, not only do they suppress your revenue, suppress your ability to share the truth, but they also create plausible deniability to cover themselves if they ever feel the need to come after you or do harm to you. So the business of being a truther, it's a dangerous business. You can lose your life over it. And it comes with long hours, low pay, lots of ridicule. So if that's what you want to do with your life, have at it. I've done it. Take it from me. It is very fulfilling, though. I will tell you that. And I personally believe that the fulfillment makes up for all the hardships that comes with it. And if you're lucky enough to grow your platform big enough, the support from your subscribers is also going to make up for it and incentivize you to keep doing it and keep working at it. So my phone's dying and I got to charge it on the car charger because there's no power because of the storm. So I got to get up out of here. I was hoping I could make it to 2 hours, but I'm already burned down to 12%. So I got to get up out of here. I appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate the love and the support. I appreciate you guys sticking around and hearing me out and sitting through this talk with me. And I hope what I said made sense to you. And I wasn't just rambling or, saying shit that didn't make no sense. I try to make sense of everything and put it to you as plainly as I possibly can. And I hope you guys have received the message. And I hope you, in taking what I said into consideration, still decide to take that leap of faith and do the brave thing and not the cowardly thing and stay silent. Because staying silent allows them to continue to perpetuate their lies. And the only way to stop the lies is for us to exercise our power, the people power, collectively by sharing the truth out in mass collectively. All right. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you guys again for being here. Sorry it had to be like this, but it is what it is. Sometimes I wonder if this freak storm came out of nowhere just to shut me down, you know what I'm saying? Because it just so happens to be my area with thousands of people out of power, you know what I'm saying? And I'm pretty sure there's other people out here that are doing the same thing I'm doing, broadcasting and putting out information that the establishment doesn't want you to have. But regardless of what it is. This is the situation we're faced with. Hopefully by Wednesday night's show, we'll have the power back on and everything will be, the city will be back to normal and life will resume. And I can give you guys some more of those dope slideshows that you like so much. So Again, guys, thank you for being here. I appreciate your love and your support. And please, if you feel so inclined, hit the Cash App, hit the PayPal, hit the Venmo. Support the show, support the show, support the show. It's very important that we get all the support we can. I want to get out and start doing more man on the street videos. I want to start, visiting places, going to political events. It's campaign season, so I'm definitely going to be popping up at a couple of Trump rallies. Art Honesty says Ohio have a storm right now. Yeah, Indiana got hit. Ohio's getting hit. Kentucky got hit. I think parts of Tennessee got hit. A lot of folks, man, a lot of folks. But anyway, like I said, it's election season, so I want to go to political rallies and talk to people at the rallies and, share some knowledge and information with them and have them talk to you guys on the videos and whatnot. So hopefully, one day, someday, I'll be able to do that. And I'm hoping that by Wednesday's show, we could get another Flat Earth Wednesday show done without having to, do another sit down like this. But it's nice to just sit down and talk sometimes. You know what I mean? So I'm glad I was able to do this. I'm glad you guys came through, check out the show. Sorry about the cheesy thumbnail. I use the AI tool that StreamYard has available to make the thumbnails. So I hope you guys don't think it's too cheesy. It is light years away from, my usual thumbnails. So don't beat me up about it. Don't point your fingers and laugh at me. I was just trying a thing. All right. But anyway, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the love, appreciate the support. I hope to see you guys back here on Wednesday, and I hope to have everything up and running so we can get another slideshow in for this Flat Earth Wednesday shit. If not, we'll just discuss Flat Earth, and I can actually take calls on the phone through StreamYard with you guys too. So if you guys want to call in and stuff, we could do all that too. So appreciate you. Much love and respect, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.